Hello and welcome to an incredibly beautiful valley in the Lake District. This place is absolutely wonderful. We've got dark mountains capped with clouds, we've got light hitting the valley below, which is incredibly green at the springtime. It's wonderful. There's not a soul up here other than me and the sheep. This place is near Blaytarn. Just hike down here a little bit further into the valley below, and this place is crying out for a panoramic photo because there's no way that all of this would fit into even a 14mm ultra wide. So I thought this is an ideal time to talk you through my top tips for taking a good panoramic photo, and hopefully it'll just make it a little bit easier the next time you go out and want to get a panoramic shot. So let's jump straight in with tip number one, which is to have your camera in a portrait orientation. Now this won't really affect the final image too much, it just gives you more cropping ability whether you want more sky or more land when you've stitched it all together in Lightroom, and it just gives you a bit more opportunities later on. So if you haven't quite got your height or your angle quite right, just means you can fix that in post later. So always stick it in portrait. What you can do to help out with this is get yourself an L bracket. I haven't had this very long and it's absolutely transformed the photography. It's been brilliant. You can put that on the camera and then it means you can easily clip it into portrait orientation as opposed to having to try and angle it on your ball head and try and flip it down, and then it's not quite central as you spin it round. I've combined that with this new tripod head as well, which is one from Three Legged Thing. I might do a review on that because I couldn't find many when I was buying this, but it has an adjustment where it will spin round and allow you to easily do a panoramic. So once you get it all level, you can just spin round a bit at a time. It's got increments and that makes it a lot easier as well, but they're definitely not necessary. I managed for 7 odd years without an L bracket, and I just, tilted the camera down on the ball head, loosened it off each time, kept it as level as I could, span it round. It doesn't need to be perfect. Lightroom or whichever software you're using will sort of work it out, and again that's another reason to have it in portrait mode, is because if the level changes slightly as you go around, it means you can cut all those off when you're finished and it won't affect your final image. Now, whilst we're on the subject of your sort of tripod head and L brackets and that sort of thing, the other thing that will really help is a good sturdy tripod. You don't really want this moving as you're taking your images and moving your camera around, especially if you're trying to, not use an L bracket and swivel it around on a ball head. It's not ideal if this thing's wobbling all over the place. So you want something that's reasonably good. I have done Panoramics handheld, so if you don't have one, it's not the end of the world. You do just have to be incredibly precise with your shots. So keep an eye on sort of the top and bottom edges, and make sure that they are sort of lined up as you swing around. Maybe if your camera's got a digital level, switch that on so you can get each shot perfectly level, and that will really help stitching things together. So it is possible, especially if you've got a steady hand, and if you're using a fast shutter speed, you can do it. So you don't necessarily need this, but it does make it a lot easier. I'll tell you what, the light here just gets better and better. I'm hoping sunset is going to be spectacular. But anyway, the next tip for your panoramics is to spin the camera around before you start taking your shots. Now what you're doing as you spin from sort of far left to far right, is you want to make sure that one, everything's within the dynamic range of your camera. So use the histogram or the light meter. I've done videos on the histogram if you want to go and check that out, but just make sure that there's nothing peaking or nothing that's too dark for your camera to pick up as you go from right to left, because ideally you want sort of the same settings for each image. If you start changing them, you can. Generally you can get away with changing the shutter speed, but it is going to make your editing much more difficult because you're going to have to try and get that light level aligned. You also want to make sure that everything's in focus, and that's going to be an issue potentially if you've got things in the foreground. Maybe when you get around to the shot on the right, we've got this wall. I think it's far enough away at an f-stop of say f8, f9, f11, something like that, to not be an issue. But if you had something, if you may wanted these rocks in the foreground included, then that could be an issue, and you might only find out when you get to your shot on the right that they're out of focus and it's not going to work. And then you've just got to go and start all over again, and you've sort of wasted time taking those first initial shots. And if you're racing against the light at sunset, that could be vital. So have a spin round, check everything's within the dynamic range, check everything's in focus, and just make sure that your camera's nice and level, and that'll make stitching them together much easier when you get back into Lightroom at the end of the day. All right, so next one, and to be honest, this is stretching the definition of a tip, to be honest, but before you take your first shot, just stick your hand in front of your camera, take a shot, and then as you do your 4 shots, at the end, do the same thing, put your hand in front of the lens, take a shot, and when you get back to edit them, be nice and easy to know which shots are part of your panoramic. Okay, so we're now finally at the point of actually taking your shots. I like to work from left to right. I just find that means I know how it's going to work when I get into post later. Now the next thing you want to do is make sure your camera's in manual mode, because you want those settings to be as close or really identical to each shot. So you want to fix your shutter speed, your f-stop, your ISO. You want all of those to be the same, and that'll make your editing job a lot easier. Ideally, you should probably fix your color temperature as well, because you don't really want that changing as you go through the scene. Personally, I never bother because it's very easy to change in Lightroom afterwards, and you can set all your pictures to the same color temperature afterwards without losing any detail or really changing it. So I never worry too much about that, but I suppose if you're being technical and you want to get everything right out in the field and do less post-processing, set your color temperature to the same for each shot. Otherwise, all you do is we start on the very left and we take a shot. We're using the 2-second timer just to take any shake out of that camera. And then we move that round and we'll take the next shot. Don't change any settings, don't change the focus point. That we all set up earlier, and we know as we pan around it's all going to be perfect. Spin around. Remember, it's always good to have more shots than too few. The more shots you have, the easier it'll be for Lightroom to work out what needs to be stitched together. So if you're ever unsure, just make sure you've got more shots than too few. You don't want any gaps in your panoramic. Now as I take these, I'm just making sure that there's a good overlap on the left hand side of the image, just so that Lightroom, when we get back into post, can stitch them all together. And there we go, that's a 5-shot panoramic. We'll stitch it all together in a minute and you'll see the result in a second. Well, that's the shots in the camera now, so unfortunately we're going to have to leave this stunning place, head back home into the editing den and get them stitched together. It's a dead easy process in something like Lightroom or Photoshop. I'll jump back onto the computer now and show you how it's done. Now, merging these together in something like Lightroom is incredibly simple. So I've already deleted the pictures of my hand that we took that told us which images we were going to use, but as you can see, we've now got our 3 images which have a good overlap between each one in Lightroom. All we do is select the 3 that we've got, right click on them, go to Photo Merge and choose Panoramic. In the window that pops up, I generally leave the default settings set, but you can play around with the different sort of perspectives if you like, if you find that works well for your image. I usually leave auto settings ticked. I generally change them in a minute anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then you just click on merge, and then Lightroom will do its thing, and you'll end up with a nice panoramic that you can then edit, crop down, cut off all of the top and bottom edges that haven't quite worked, and then you're ready to go. Easy as that. Now those tips will get you a good panoramic shot straight out of the gate, but there's a couple of other things just off the top of my head that will also help you with your shots. And the first one is to not dither as you're taking your photos. You know, if you've got light that's changing, or if it's like today and it's a bit windy and the clouds are moving, you want to fire those shots off as quickly as possible to make stitching them together easier, and also avoid, you know, different patches of light moving across your scene as your eye works from left to right. So don't hesitate taking those shots. You know, first one, second one, fire, get them all done as quickly as you can. And if there's something wrong, go back and take another set. Don't, you know, spend 30 seconds when you get halfway around deciding that you want to change something. Scrap it at that point, start again. The other option, the other thing to mention is don't use a really wide angle lens. And I'm sort of talking like 14mm, that sort of thing. Something sort of the 30mm range, 24 certainly and up. Just will make it a bit easier, because you want the images to be fairly flat. You know, you don't want that sort of slightly concave look that you sometimes get with a 14mm ultra wide lens. I know that you can correct that in Lightroom and it sort of does it automatically, and if not, you can go in and adjust it, but it just makes it easier if you haven't got to deal with all of that. So stick with 24mm upwards would be my recommendation. Well, I hope you like that image. That's been great fun to make that one. I always enjoy a good panoramic shot. Just think it's a bit different to the usual photography, and it gives it a slightly different perspective as well. So definitely worth going out there. Hopefully these will help you next time you do, and give panoramics a go. If they've helped you, or if you think they're more useful, give this video a quick like so that YouTube shows it to some more people. Consider subscribing, some other content, and I really hope to see you soon.